So basically what I'll talk about, so welcome everyone. This is an overview of the annual operating program for professional arts organizations. And what I'll do in this presentation is I'll walk us through first the application form itself. So we're aware of what's on there and the information we have to include there. And then I'll go through a brief PowerPoint outlining just specific points and information that it's good to keep in mind as you complete an application. On our way through, if you have questions, let me know. If I'm in the middle of the things, I'll get back to you. It's fine. So first, let's just talk about the annual operating program itself and what it's about. So this program is for not-for-profit professional arts organizations only. So we have other programs. There's a community arts program for community-based arts organizations, and there's a project grants program for professional artists and groups like bands and things like that. But this is for people that run organizations will be applying here. So the organizations is an important part here. Eligibility. So the program is open to all artistic disciplines that you may work in, so that's fine. We list them here, the ones that the ArtsNL will support. And the definition of a professional not-for-profit arts organization is very important, because this is the eligibility criteria we're looking at. When you talk to me about your organization, these are the checklist I want to go through to confirm that your organization is eligible. So the first is that the creation and presentation of the arts is a primary activity of your organization. Sometimes we have organizations that do some art, but really they're about social development or something like that. So those would be eligible, but so you have to be an arts organization, and these are the arts we support at ArtsNL. That it's registered or operates as a not-for-profit arts entity. I figured that out by typically by your financial statements. By that, or if you are actually registered in the province as a not-for-profit, I can look that up online to confirm it that way too. It has a board of directors overseeing the operations of the organization. Sometimes it may not be called a board of directors. It may be called programming committees or things like that. Some organizations have different language around that. If you're registered, it's going to be called a board for sure. But if you're not registered as a not-for-profit, just operating as one, you may have a different name for that entity, and that's fine. Has a paid artistic director, general manager, or equivalent, so there must be paid staff, someone running your organization who does get paid a fee. Many organizations, for smaller ones, those are contract fees. So it's a contracted person to run it for a festival, a small festival or something like that for a couple of months or several months. But it has to be someone paid. It can't be just volunteer. If it's just volunteers running it, we're kind of leaning towards community arts-based organizations. Pays fees at established national standards for the artistic discipline for artists. So you do have to pay artist fees for it. So that means that, standard rates for disciplines they're different. So for music, it's typically the professional musicians union kind of rates. For there are established composer rates if you're hiring a composer. For theater, there's equity rates for that kind of thing. So these are the kind of things we're looking at. And I'm sure the artists have no trouble telling you how much they're supposed to pay, because they're all very up to date on that as well. That has internal or external oversight of the organization's finances and produces an annual financial statement. So we need to know that you're tracking your finances, that you're doing proper oversight of those, as any organization that has money through it does do. And to confirm that, we'll ask you for a financial statement for your last completed fiscal year, and that has to include income and expenses, a list of a surplus or deficit for your last year, and accumulated surplus deficit. So those three have to be in there when you're giving us that document. The other eligibility requirements are residency age and activity. So you must have been active in Newfoundland and Labrador, so within the province for a minimum of 1 year before you can submit. So you can't just decide, oh, I'm going to form an organization now and we'll apply to the Arts Council. No, we need confirmation that you've been active for at least a year when you submit an application. If you aren't, we'll pull the application. And a lot of times I have to tell people, look, you have to do one yourself if you're doing a festival or an event or something like that. as an organization, you kind of have to do one yourself. So do that first and then come to us again. Must have actively engaged in professional activities within the last year as well. So we need to see that you are actually active. Sometimes we get organizations, they kind of pop up and they happen for a little while. We see some small theater companies like this. And then the people involved kind of dissipate and they do other work, and then 5 years later they come back and the name pops up again. Well, you can't really do that. You need to be consistently active and keeping your work going annually to be eligible for this program. And must have at least half your board members residing in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's pretty obvious what that means. And the final one, must have at least half your board members and artists hired be over 18 years of age. And that's because the Arts Council, we fund the arts for adults. So our mandate isn't youth, that's actually the Department of Education's mandate. So our mandate is for the adult population as far as the artistic activity. And we do have people say, well, we have had groups that involve young people, and often they say, well, how many are over 18? Because they have to be at least half in order for that organization, that group, to be eligible. So that's across all our programs. And at least half the board members as well in the organization. So the deadline is February 15th. That's pretty consistent. We haven't changed that. That's been that date for a long time. And it's for projects starting after April 15th. Okay. If you are applying to the sustaining program, some of you might be, that deadline has changed. It's now February 1st. So if you're applying to both, because this year that's possible, you can apply to this program and the sustaining program. The sustaining deadline is February 1st, annual operating, February 15th. You must submit, if the deadline's on a holiday, obviously it's the next business day. That's in all our programs. 7 copies. People are always a little surprised. 7 copies. Yeah, right now we do require that, and that's because we have a multidisciplinary committee, so all the artistic disciplines listed here could actually need to be represented at that table. So we need at least 7. We could actually have 7 assessors, up to that many, and we'd actually have to print a copy, one of your applications. So we figure 7 makes sense. Usually it's 5, but it could be 6. So that's why we need 7, and it could actually be 7, but that's so rare, we don't require you to add extra copies for that. And they must be received, and this is a new requirement, by 4:30 p.m. on the application deadline or postmarked by the deadline date. Well, in the past, we would allow people to email it to us and then send us the copies later. That's council has said no to that. The deadline's a deadline, a firm one. So all 7 copies have and any attachments have to be in the office by 4:30 or postmarked by the deadline date. So that means that if you don't have it ready by 4:30, you have to drop it in the mail. We can't accept it any other way. And all 7 copies as well. Yeah.
Do you need support material for all 7 copies as well, or one bundle of support material is okay?
All 7 copies.
Okay.
Yeah. Support material. The only thing that we only need one of is the financial statement. So that's the application form, 7 copies of the application form, of your project description, of your organizational history, of support material as well, and resumes and anything like that. So 7 copies of all that. I will state that we are moving towards an online application process and system, and we're trying to have that in place sometime in 2017. And once that's up, obviously you won't need to provide copies. It will all be online. So we are moving that way, like many arts councils across the country. So once that's in place, all of this will change again. So by next year, I should be telling you very different things about the number of copies. So the maximum grant is $10,000. There's $150,000 to award annually, and that's what it will be this year as well. There's been no increase in funding, I'm sorry to report, but it will be $150,000. The minimum grant is $1,000, or the request of less than that. Typical grants, people do get $10,000. Usually I haven't seen anything lower than 5 awarded in this program in my working with it. So I mean, that's 5 to 10 is typically what you will what you will see. It can fluctuate year to year. If you get 9,000 one year, that doesn't mean you'll get 9,000 the next year. It can fluctuate. Anyone who's applied to the program over a number of years knows that. And it can fluctuate by $1,000 or even $2,000 sometimes, depending on the situation and the assessment committee and how they assess your application. So these are the program guidelines, and these are pretty straightforward. So you must use the application form provided. It's on our website. Use that one. You can download it to your computer, and I encourage you to do that because the website won't save it for you. So if you want to save the document, download it to your computer, save it, complete it there, and save it there. Incomplete applications will not be considered. That's another requirement, and council's asked us to be firm on that. So if you are missing your financial statement, if you are missing your organizational history, if you are missing your listing of your board, that's incomplete, that application will be pulled. You're encouraged to, and because of that, we are encouraging now people to book meetings with program staff before deadlines to bring in your completed application, one copy, and just go through that just to confirm everything's there and it's complete, and then that you're ready to, and that there's no issues in the project at all. So you can actually book those on our website. On the left-hand side, there's a little greenish schedule now button there. If you click on that, it will bring you to the Schedulicity website. You can select me and book an appointment with me. I'm encouraging all applicants to do that now in sustaining and in annual operating, just to have a review of it. It will book you in for an hour meeting, and those will fill up, and so I can encourage people to do it early. And you kind of use that as your deadline to have your application together then, if you can. It will be busy, like I said, in January, February, so try to do that. They must be typed or handwritten, so if you use the PDF that we have on the website, that will be typed. Only one application per organization, so per grant period, so we'll only accept one. So everything you're doing for this year should be in that application. So and that will be from April 15th, 2016 this year to April 14th, 2017. So think of it that way, as a full year. Other sources of funding, like in any of our programs, it's expected to be there. Again, 7 copies, and there's a listing of all what should be in there. Here, we'll get into that in more detail later. You're encouraged to include support materials, 7 copies again. A financial statement, and it must include a list of revenues and expenses, surplus and deficit for the last year, and accumulated surplus and deficit. If any of that's missing, that's incomplete. So it has to all be there. Retroactive applications won't be considered, so it has to be for work going forward, not for work that's been done in the past. And applicants will receive confirmation within 2 weeks. So when you apply to us, you should get an email from us saying we got your application. If you don't get that, please contact us to make sure, because maybe the email didn't go through or something, but to make sure your application is in. Funding will only support travel based on the most economical route. We'll get into that when we talk about budgets and that, but that's a typical provincial government requirement. Final reports are important. If you get funding, you must submit a final report. And if you already have a project that you haven't submitted a final report on, well, you can submit an application, that's okay. But if that application is successful, before we'll issue a check, we'll need the final report in and signed off on by staff. So we won't issue a check on a new project until the final report on a past project is submitted. So be aware of that. And if you do apply to the annual operating, you can't apply to the project grants or the community arts for additional funding. So they're kind of directing you to the program that fits you, and that's where you'll go. As I mentioned, because this is a year 1 coming up in sustaining, you can actually apply to the sustaining and the annual operating this year, this coming year, 2017. But if you are funded in sustaining, we will pull your annual operating application. That's how that will work. Applications are reviewed by typically 5 to 7 person committee, and it's a multidisciplinary based committee. So it's one representative of film, one of theater, one of music, one of dance, for example, depending on what's on the table, the disciplines that are there. So, and typically in the meeting, that individual representing theater, for example, would start the discussion on the theater applications. And everyone else would speak on the application as well. And then as a group, the committee would decide how to tag or whether or not to fund that application. All right, any questions on the program? This is me, and my contact information is right on the application form. So I'm pretty easy to reach. This is the application form itself. So obviously this section, the file number we will put in. This section is just information, your personal information. The brief, this is, the title, give a decent title for it, because we'll use that in media releases, what you want us to call it. And the brief summary here is good. It's important to give us a brief overview of what you want us to say about your application to the public, if it's funded, because we use this as the basis of a description of your project in a media release if you are funded. So it's important that you tell us what you really want us to tell the public about this project if it's funded. And the start and end date, typically I encourage people to take a full year, so say April 15th to April 14th the following year. And that gives you the full year then to do. Some projects really do just happen over the summer, for example. We see a lot of those. And if you want to just put that in as the dates, that's fine too. But typically, just to give yourself the full scope of the year, and we do call it annual operating after all, that's what I typically encourage people to do. The privacy, just so you know that your document once submitted is a government document, so it is protected under the Privacy Act, and so it is kept confidential and handled as a government document. So any access to that would have to be made to a request to the Access to Information Act as well. And so just so you know that it is, so we don't share information with anyone who doesn't need to know the information. So your application goes to assessors. They do sign a conflict of interest and confidentiality form before we send them applications. So they're not allowed to discuss it with anyone but staff and other people on the assessment committee. So your information is private. So your grant checklist. 7 copies, and these are the items that must be there. So a description of the organization's history, a detailed description of the upcoming season or event, a list of your current board, including province of residency. That's what we need to confirm, that at least half of them are residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's why we ask them. It seems obvious that, well, of course they are, but I do get ones where it's not, and I've had talked to organizations that have had to make changes to their board in order to be eligible to apply because they had board members who weren't resident of the province. So it does happen. A detailed annual budget for your upcoming year. So I encourage, you're probably doing an annual budget anyway, and that's why we ask for that. Instead of focusing on projects and you pulling out a project out of your budget, you're doing your annual budget anyway. Just give us that. That's what you're working with anyway. And it also gives you the full scope of your year's activities to use the funding for, because we're funding this overall annual cycle for you. So it gives you a little more opportunity to decide how you want to use it, how you want to use any funding. Updated resumes, bios for key participants that confirm a professional arts practice, and that's your artist there. If you want to include bios for admin staff as well, you can do that, but we don't absolutely require that in this program. We do in community arts. We actually ask for that, but in this one, because you're paid professional administrators, we assume, well, you have good people. I know for some people, they don't know when they apply who's going to be part of their season or their festival, and that's okay. I just encourage you to give us all the information you can. If you have the information, let us know, and that helps clarify things. But people could be applying in February for this program, and their event may not be till March the following year, or April the following year. So it's important that they, so we can't expect that you have your season set up that far in advance and everyone in place, all your artists in place. So, just as much information as you can give us is what I would recommend there. And again, the financial statement, I've already gone through the requirements on that. Support material. It's a few additions here to be aware of. Dropbox, Google+, things like that, we can accept material in that format. Typically because you need to, like an email or you show who's getting the material. Now, if you are sending images, you can send them in JPEGs, you can send them on a CD if you want to do that, or DVDs, you can send those. More and more though for film-based stuff, I'm seeing online links for videos, and that's okay. Vimeo or even YouTube. A lot of people like Vimeo because you can password protect it so that it's not just out there for anyone, and you can send in like, here's the Vimeo link and here's the password for that, so that assessors can access it that way. We see more and more of that, and that's fine, that's completely acceptable. We see more people just setting up just on their website and direct people towards the website because they will have a gallery of images of their past work or the work that they're doing, and that's acceptable as well. We'll accept that. For writing, certainly manuscripts, CDs, scores for compositions, and recent reviews, if you're going to include those, maximum 10 pages. A standard 8.5 by 11 format is best, so put them on sheets that size.
Is the jury willing to look at blogs?
Blogs? I think you'd want to direct them. Yeah, I think if you're looking at a specific blog, you'd want to kind of be specific about this is the quote we want you to see, because blogs can go into the weeds a lot. They cover a broad area.
No, I'm talking about more like a review.
Oh, a review, yeah.
I mean, they're in blog form on the website.
Yes.
Will the jury look at the website?
I would encourage you to.
Photos of Greg's narrative.
Yeah, I would encourage you to make the link directly to that review, if you can. If you want
I
the
can
link.
print off the,
I would encourage you to print it. If you can print it into a standard 8.5 by 11 format, I would encourage you to do that.
Most of them are max page and a half.
Yeah,
kind of thing,
that's-
but that includes a photo.
Yes, that's
So-
great. Yeah, I would encourage you to print that and send it to them that way. When we go to online applications, you'll be able to just send a link into that, and that'll be much simpler. But for this process, I would encourage that. If you want your support material returned, you must provide a self-addressed stamped envelope for correct postage to send it back to you. Finally, the declaration, and this is just confirming that you've given us correct information so that the statements made are true, that any funds awarded will be used as you state in the application. If there are changes, you need to ask us to let us know that significant changes. Any publicity or promotion material needs to acknowledge the support of ArtsNL, and you'll get in your grant acceptance contract, if you are funded, there'll be a full page listing what that expectation is. I've been authorized by the organization, so that just confirms that you have authority to sign off on this application, and you will accept the conditions and processes of the peer assessment committee as well. And that's just confirming that you're aware that this is a competitive process, it is a peer assessed process, and that you understand how that works. And I've submitted all final reports on previous grants, and if not, then I will not be issued a check until I do. That's all that's saying. All right, so that's the application form. I'm sorry, it's a lot of detail, but I find I have to go through it very clearly just so everyone has a good sense of it. So as far as tips on writing this, I'll go through the PowerPoint now quickly, and if you have any questions, just ask. So this is just quickly the mandate of ArtsNL and what we're about, and how we're here to foster and promote the arts of the province for the enjoyment of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Just so you know, our council is appointed by government. They're government appointees. They are volunteers, and they cover the arts disciplines, plus one business representative and one community-based representative as well. So you're aware of that. And also one person who, from the Department of Tourism, Culture and Rural Development, sits on the committee as a liaison there. They'd be in non-voting as far as they don't decide funding decisions, or they don't sit on peer assessment committees. only the council members appointed, typically for the discipline in which they're appointed for, the arts discipline. They sit on assessment committees as well, and then we get arts from the arts community as well. So here's the programs that we offer right now. Today, we're talking about the annual operating program for arts organizations. There's also the sustaining for arts organizations. The other programs will be for different, and the other program that you could apply for is the school touring program as well. So you can apply to, for example, annual operating and school touring, or sustaining and school touring. Whoops. As well. So just so you're aware of those. So in the into grant writing now. So for the annual operating, these are just the basic parts of your application. The application form, your budget, project description, and support materials. Again, 7 copies of those. General tips, read the whole application, especially if you haven't done it before. And even if you have, because sometimes there are slight changes there, just to be able to make sure you have the latest version of that. It should be the first thing you read, the last thing you complete. So get your project nailed down, figure out what you want to do first, get all the other information together, and then complete the form. Handprint or type your application. There is the online form, as I said. And make sure you sign the application form. It has to be a physical signature. We don't accept digital signatures at this time. And make sure the start date is after April 15th. I'll change that. That's one of the few things I can change on your application now once I get it. If it's not the correct start date, I can make it that. If you made an error in your budget, addition error, I can correct that for you as well.
So should it be April 16th then? If it's after April 15th, or can it be April 15th?
It can be April 15th,
Okay.
because you'll actually be notified April 15th.
Okay.
Read the budget notes section carefully, and we'll get to that. And the ArtsNL, our website, that's where you can check the budget as well, and check the application form. Find that there. So required types, so a description of the organization's history. That's like a half-pager, maximum 1 page. We just want an overview of what you've done and what you're about. I don't need 5 pages on that. And the assessment committee doesn't want to read 5 pages on that, I guarantee you. A half page to 1 page is plenty. A detailed description of the season and events for your upcoming year. Yeah, probably, maximum 3 pages. You should be able to describe what you want to do. That should be enough. If it's really, that's enough detail. If you really have a lot going on, then maybe more, 4 pages. I'd never go over 4 pages on that if I could help it. A list of your current board members, including residency information, so that's like a quarter of a page. It should take you to do that. Updated resumes for key participants. Again, the resumes are the resumes. Resumes, and we do say bios as well. The key thing there is that you're showing what their professional arts practice is, highlighting that. So bios are shorter. A lot of bands will give you bios as opposed to resumes. That's fine. That's acceptable groups like that. Don't give us the really, really short bios, like their long bio, which may be like a quarter of a page. Something like that. That's probably better to highlight their full arts practice. 1 copy of the financial statement. So all this is 7 copies, 1 copy of the financial statement. And support material is optional, but typically recommended in this program, I would certainly recommend. The project description, any arts council or any writers for giving you advice on writing a project description is typically going to talk about the W5 approach. And it is just the simplest way to organize your thoughts and to make sure you're covering everything you need to cover in your project description. And that's, what and how, like very simply what do you want to do. This is a festival, this is a series, this is a presentation of theater, we're presenting plays, we're developing plays. Keep it simple language, simple and clear as far as direction of what you want to do. And how you're going to do it then is just a brief description of how this is going to work for you guys. It doesn't have to be every detail, but just to hit the highlights of the process you're going to go through here. Who will be involved? That's very simple, very direct. Where will the project happen? That's, if it's touring, if it's in a St. John's-based project, if it's a Ponte Vista-based project, name the community where it's going to be, where it's going to take place. If you're going to do outreach to other communities, say that in there as well. That's important. When will it happen? That's a simple timeline. You know, by this date we're going to be planning, this date we'll be deciding on who's going to be taking part, this date we're going to be, you know, we'll start our events and then we'll finish on this date. You know, just the highlights. And that just helps verify when it's happening and how you've planned it. And it just shows as well that you've planned this before. You have a plan, you do your calendar for your events, and it shows that you're on top of that. And finally, the hardest one is probably why. Why do you want to do this? Why is it important? But really, if you look at your organizational mandate, that's telling you why you're doing it. And that's usually where I direct people when they say, well, I don't know what to say about why. So, well, what's the mandate here? For projects, it's a little different, but for organizations, it's your mandate. You're meeting your mandate, and this is how we're meeting our mandate in this process. Support materials, 7 copies again. If you're submitting reviews, make sure they're good reviews. I have actually had reviews submitted that have raised questions, and so that's why it's there. Images should be good quality and in a digital format, PDFs typically. Or JPEG, something like that. It's typically you want them above screen resolution. You know, you want some decent resolution so that if someone looks, they can go closer and get a good sense of how, especially for visual art, if you're doing that. So people do assessor tend to want to get close to kind of see what they do. Don't include a video of a play or a dance piece, typically, unless it's of really good quality. And the reason for that is that live performance is just a different time than video. Video makes everything look longer. In real time, it's happening in the time of life, but when you put a video in there, it just seems like a second of video is a long time. So I've seen good plays that I've seen people present or send in videos of that are just record videos, and they haven't done the play justice. So I've seen that happen. So, and I've seen it the other way as well. I've seen dance pieces that really weren't, you know, clearly explained in the application. Like you really didn't, you understood what they were doing, but you really didn't get a sense of the whole. And they submitted a video of it, and the whole came together, and the assessment can say, okay, yes, oh, I love that. I was kind of confused. I wasn't really sure by the description, but when you show me the video, now I get it. So that's the reaction you want with a video as well. And demos for music should be of decent quality as well. We've had some pretty rough demos, and people's like, well, you couldn't hear the song. The demo really sounded bad. Manuscripts should be typed. Press clippings, if you're making copies of those, make sure they're legible. Videos can be hosted online, and if you want them returned, a self-addressed envelope. Things to remember on your annual budget. Complete the budget after you've already done your project description, because figure out what you want to do and then build in your costs afterwards. And anyone who's done a budget knows that's how it has to be. You build each project and then you build the overall budget out of that. Capital costs can't be covered through ArtsNL, just as a general note. Quotes, include quotes for over $1,000 if you can. It's not required, but it does sometimes show,
Could you give an example of that?
Sound equipment is often for a large event. There could be in the thousands of dollars for rental of sound and video equipment for a large event. And if you show that you've got a quote in already, then I usually, it just justifies that cost. I usually say that if there's anything in there that's going to be expensive for you, and you think they might question it, like if it really costs that much, because assessors will do that. I don't know why their sound equipment is so expensive, but if you have a quote there showing, so, oh, well, I guess it is. They can't argue with the quote, typically. They say, oh, maybe you'll get a better quote. Well, that's the quote they have. Airlines are a good example of that, too, if you're doing travel, just to show that, look, it really does cost $1,000 to fly someone in from Calgary. I know you got a deal at some time, and you got it for $700, but it's really $1,000. Or the classic example is flying someone in from Labrador.
You're not talking about artist fees, though.
No, not artist fees. It will be artist fees are, there's general ones. Yeah, and they can be negotiated, and there's general standards as well. But for things like, equipment, anything that you think that's a large that they might question, I encourage you to do that. It's not required, but it's encouraged. You can use your own budget form. That's fine. I get many people do it on Excel and they send me that. Just make sure it's readable. I had one in an application, it was tiny. And I can't ask you to send me a bigger one. I just have to use the tiny one, and it was so tiny. And I had trouble figuring that out as well. My eyes are not what they used to be either. But please, make it big, make sure it's readable for the assessor. So print it and look at it beforehand before you submit it. And keep it simple. Like sometimes you can get into a lot of details on those, but keep the general, categories similar to what we have on the application form is useful as well. And I do say still put in your request, your total and the request on the application form, if you're the application budget that's there, just so it's a quick reference for the assessors when they're going through, oh, they're asking for this much. Their project's costs are this much and they're asking for this much. Okay. And then, on your attached one, you can get in all the details there. Try to be as exact as possible. Certainly, applications that always end in 00. Sometimes they get questioned, like, are they really doing the research to know how much this costs as well? Check your figures twice. ArtsNL offers its contributions towards, these can be other contributions towards a project. That's typically, we're going to see the maximum grant here in this program is $10,000. I don't think any of the projects cost $10,000 or any of the annual operating for any of these organizations. What you need to do just to be eligible is going to be more than $10,000 a year. So tell us who else is supporting this application and who you've applied to. If you're not familiar with developing a budget, come talk to us. And again, book in before the deadline to come talk to us. These are the kinds of details we can work out before the application is submitted. And read the budget notes on the application. And that's just going to give you information about cost for travel rates, and per diems and things like that as well, and the fact that you can't include capital costs. Some general tips then. Have someone read over your application with a critical eye. It can be me. I will come in and read over your application with a critical eye before the deadline. Strongly encourage applications to book an appointment, and again, have me come in and read it, book an appointment. Please do that. 7 copies are required, 7 copies of support material. Check the figures. Remember, everyone wants to give you a grant. The assessment committees don't come in here thinking, oh, I'm going to be as hard as I can, and I don't want to give anyone any money. They're actually there, and they're peers, and they want to give people funding. They really do want to support all the applications. The reality is, there's going to be more requests than there is funds available. We have $150,000. We'll easily get $250,000, $300,000 in requests in this program, easily. And so that may mean that not everyone's getting a grant, or that not everyone's going to be able to get the full request. So it is not easy what we ask peer assessors to do. It's a difficult process, and we ask them to make that assessment based on the application you've submitted. So it is difficult, and at certain points, they are going to have to say no to someone, and they probably are going to have to look for reasons to say no when we compare with everything else on the table. It is a comparison of the other applications on the table with yours. That's what they're comparing. It's not a general statement on your organization. It's not a general statement on your season. It's based on what we had on the table. This is where you landed, and sometimes that means you get funded, and sometimes that can mean you don't get funded. But don't extrapolate beyond that. It's just one session, and you can always come back. So, try to give them and the best way to do that, to make it hard for them to say no, is to give them everything and explain it well. Sometimes competition can be tough, so be aware that it is a competitive process, unfortunately, because we don't have enough funds to fund everyone. If you don't get a grant, and sometimes even if you do, we encourage you to give feedback, and just call me, and I'll be able to tell you a general overview of what the committee said. I won't tell you what any one assessor said, but I will tell you the overall review of your application and what the committee itself thought of it. And again, online applications are coming. After your application has been assessed, you will be notified by mail. Everyone's notified by mail whether you're successful or not. But you can call in, and as of April 15th, in the afternoon, because we usually have the ratification meeting by council in the morning. They'll confirm the funding is okay. So call me in the afternoon, I'd be able to tell you over the phone if you've been funded or not as well. But everyone will get. So if you are waiting for a mail notification and you haven't called me, you shouldn't wait any more than a week after the deadline to call me. Successful applications of the grant acceptance contract, that needs to be, you need to sign off on that, sign that, and confirm that you understand it lists the requirements of the grant acknowledgement and just that you would have to complete the project as presented in your application, that kind of thing. So once you sign off on that and date it, you send that back to me. As long as you don't owe any final reports, I can process that. We can have a check out in 5 to 10 business days to you. If you do owe a final report, I'll hold on to that grant acceptance contract until the final reports that's owed is in and signed off on, and then I'll process it. So that's what I'm saying there. Now you must acknowledge ArtsNL support, so logos, publicity, advertisement, media. There's a long list on the grant acceptance form, so be aware of that, read it over, make sure you're meeting those. Websites, I see a lot sometimes when people don't list us as a funder on their website, and I'd encourage you to do that. Most organizations, professional arts organizations, have a website, so if you're funded by us, please acknowledge it there. That's where we should be acknowledged there, and all your funders should really. Finally, a final report on the grant that you got is due typically 3 months after. It depends on when you complete, when your fiscal year end is, when you complete the project. Some people put in final reports before the new deadline because they can, because maybe they went in the summer and now they're in slow time. Some people after, and that's fine. Whatever works for you guys. And again, there's my contact information.